What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. Got a little dark on that side, aren't I? That should be a little bit better. All right. Anyways, yeah, back in front of the green screen. No, this is not another review video. As you can see above me, playoff picture. It's now going to be the first week of October. So the first week of October football is happening this week. The date will be October 7th as of recording this. It is September 29th. So an updated look at the playoff picture, in my opinion, right? What I think the playoff picture has shaped out to be, what the different conferences are looking like, things like that. I know I'm covering part of the board right now. I promise if you watch this video, you're going to get to see all of it. You're going to hear my opinions on it, on everything. But before this video starts, if you guys can leave a like, share, subscribe, do all the good stuff, that would really help me out a lot. Shows that you want to see this. And hey, yeah, might do some more of these types of videos in the future. So let's go ahead and get into the playoff picture. So up here, I have all the 5 power conferences. There you go. And then below me right there, you see the group of 5 and independent. We'll get there, I promise. We're going to save that for last. So we're going to go in alphabetical order through the power 5 conferences and then talk about the group of 5 independent teams through 4 weeks or 5 weeks, technically, if you count week 0, which I do. Of course, I reviewed and predicted it. So technically through 5 weeks, or I guess I should say through September. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump into it, right? So the ACC is probably the one that people are going to say, oh, well, they're out. Oh, well, there's no way the ACC can make the playoff. And I'm going to majority agree and say, yeah, there probably is a very slim shot the ACC makes the playoff, but I don't think they're necessarily out of it quite yet. For the most part, I'd say probably. And this is the surprising thing up here, right? Clemson, Miami, North Carolina all have 2 losses. All of them are at that 2-2 record right there, which is surprising because maybe you thought one of those teams at least, or I should say at most, right? Because I don't think anyone thought any of these 3 teams were going to go 2-2 through the first 4 weeks. Just with the way their schedules played out. I know Clemson had to play Georgia, Miami had to play Bama, North Carolina had a couple tricky ones in there as well. But yeah, some surprising results for these teams here. So, and that's going to lead a lot of people to say, well, the ACC's out, right? The ACC done, can't get in. Not necessarily. In my opinion, they likely need an undefeated champion. And the only 2 undefeated teams left in the ACC are right here, Wake Forest and Boston College. Wake Forest in the polls right now. They're playing some really good football. So is Boston College. But they don't have Phil Jurkovec, and that's going to be a huge thing later down the line. Both of them, well, and also here's the problem. Both of them play in the same division, right? Both are in the ACC Atlantic, and that's a problem. They cannot play each other in the ACC championship game, so they're going to have to play each other sometime in the season, obviously. But when is that? Final week of the season. So if both of these teams can get undefeated, can be 11-0 before that final game, that's a huge game. Likely both in the top 15, and that would be a huge game. And then likely you'd still face the winner of Miami, North Carolina, maybe Virginia Tech in that other division in the ACC title game. But you also got to watch out for this team down here. That's North Carolina State. They can make things interesting. Look, they already beat Clemson. And for North Carolina State, they still have to play Boston College, Wake Forest, and the other 2 teams up here, Miami and North Carolina. They get all 4 of those teams. So Wake Forest can still make things interesting and can still shape the picture in the ACC, as well as some other teams. Virginia Tech could as well, but of course they're not up here on the board. Pitt could as well. Syracuse maybe even. They've been looking all right. But again, that's the thing with the ACC. Let's go back to Wake Forest, Boston College, because Wake Forest over the next 4 weeks, over the month of October, not really a whole lot of games that they really have to worry about. But that last 4 games, and we'll get back to this if Wake Forest is still undefeated in a month's time. But the last 4 games in the month of November for Wake Forest looks like this. On the road against North Carolina, they play NC State, then they go on the road against Clemson, and then play Boston College. Boston College still has to play Clemson. That game is this week. They play North Carolina State this month as well. And then again, that final game against Wake Forest. So it's going to be really hard for either of those teams to go undefeated. The ACC's got a lot of figuring out left to do. again, likely if you're a fan of any team in the ACC and you like the conference, you want the conference to do well, want the conference to get into the playoff, likely need an undefeated champion with the way that these three teams have played thus far. All right. If you have any questions about the ACC and you want to hear more of my opinions, leave that in the comment section down below. I'll say that after every conference. But now moving on to the Big 12. And of course, the Big 12 as well still has a lot of working out to do. But the surprise of the season has been this thus far. Iowa State has 2 losses. And they played Iowa. And maybe some people were like, yeah, you lose that one. But there's probably not a way they lose anyone else. With the expectations coming into this season, they have not looked like the top 10 team that we thought they were going to look like at all. And them dropping the 2-2 has pushed them out of the playoff picture, but not out of the Big 12 championship game picture. But again, playing from behind now. There are 3 undefeated teams left in the Big 12, and that is Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Baylor. Of course, they have yet to play each other in the Big 12. Everyone plays everyone. So there's only going to be 1 undefeated team left in the Big 12, as with every other year. Who's that going to be? Well, here's the round robin for these undefeated teams, right? For Oklahoma, you play Baylor and Oklahoma State in the last month of the season. For Oklahoma State and Baylor, you play this week. So there's going to be 1 fewer undefeated team in the Big 12 after this Saturday. Again, I'll talk about that more tomorrow. I'll probably end up previewing that game between Oklahoma State and Baylor. And then on Sunday when I do my review, right? But then Baylor's more interesting because, again, they get Oklahoma State this week and they get Oklahoma next month. And again, talk about that matchup more if it's still big enough. But they also have BYU on the schedule. And BYU has looked really good. They have them on the 16th. So in 3 weeks' time, not this week, not next week, but the week after. And that's going to be a really interesting test for this Baylor team to see where they stand. But these 3 teams right here, all right now are the front runners. Technically, it's Baylor because they are 2-0 in the conference. Oklahoma has kind of been sleepwalking per se. And then for Oklahoma State, well, Oklahoma State just, they've played good, but they haven't played as good as they probably can play, right? Spencer Sanders had his first true good game last week against Kansas State. And again, if that can continue this week against Baylor, that's going to be key. That's going to be key. Sorry, again, still a little congested. But that is going to be a huge game. I'll talk more about that one on Thursday or tomorrow, I guess. So also, you got to watch out for these teams down here. TCU, Texas, and West Virginia. Probably out of the playoff picture. Maybe not Texas because Texas can go ahead and make themselves a pretty nice run, in my opinion, and can get into the playoff if they, again, win out and win the Big 12. But other than that, these teams can shake up the picture. I don't think Kansas State can as much with Skylar Thompson being out. I don't think Texas Tech can because of that defense. And I don't think Kansas can because, well, it's Kansas. But all the rest of the teams in the Big 12, again, they have to play everyone. The only 2 matchups between teams that are on this board right now were last week. Baylor beating Iowa State and Oklahoma beating West Virginia. So there's still a lot to play out in the Big 12. The Big 12 playoff picture is far from being complete. In fact, it's just getting started to be formed. Again, these 3 undefeated teams will be looking to continue that undefeated season. Can one of them come out undefeated? Are we going to have more debate about the Big 12 this year? That is the question, right? Again, also watch out for Iowa State because if they can get their stuff together, they have a lot of good talent and they can be a really, really good team. Maybe they can even push their way back in the top 25 poll, but I think all 7 of these teams on here can push their way into the top 25 poll at any point this season if they play well enough and they win enough games, right? But again, there are going to be some upsets in the Big 12 this year. Again, we already saw one with Baylor beating Iowa State. We'll see if there are more later down the road. All right, I'm going to back up a little bit. We're going to talk about the Big 10, the Big 10 conference. This is another interesting conference. So for the Big 10, there are a lot of impact games left on the schedule, and we'll get there, but some surprise eliminations thus far. Indiana and Wisconsin, both of them have 2 losses. Now, excuse me, you maybe thought Indiana might have 2 losses up to this point, because again, look, they played Cincinnati, they played Iowa on the road. Those are two tough teams. But the way that Indiana has looked just hasn't been the way we thought Indiana was going to look, right? And then for Wisconsin starting out 1-2, not a lot of people predicted that either. I saw a lot of people saying that Wisconsin was going to go undefeated this year. They had the talent, but Graham Mertz has just not played that well. To be fully honest, they haven't really been able to get everything worked out at Wisconsin. So again, playing from behind, playoff chances probably done, but can still shape the Big Ten picture. And speaking of which, lots of undefeated teams left in the Big 12. Count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 undefeated teams left in the Big Ten. Those being Penn State, Iowa, who are both in the top 5, Michigan, Michigan State. So the state of Michigan is very happy right now. And Maryland, believe it or not, is undefeated with a win over a team we just talked about over here in West Virginia. So, yeah, the Big Ten still has a lot of sorting out to do. But when you look at these teams up here, especially the ones ranked in the top 25 right now, Maryland can definitely get there, and they are close. They're close to breaking into the top 25. Close in my mind, close in the AP voters' mind. Again, but for all these teams up here, take care of business and you're in. It's as simple as that. But the one team you can't count out is obviously Ohio State. That loss to Oregon is looking better and better each week because Oregon continues to look like a top 4 team. We'll talk about Oregon here in a little bit, but for this Ohio State team, yes, there are some improvements that need to be made, especially on the defensive end. But if they can make those improvements, they can not necessarily easily, but they can still go out and win every single game they have left on the schedule. They have the talent to do it. If that defense can continue to play well like it did against Akron, again, it's Akron, so we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting to see what happens the rest of the Big Ten season. And there are a lot of impact games in October. So I'm going to go through those here really quick. The impact games in October. So this week of the 2nd, you have Iowa at Maryland on Friday night, Ohio State at Rutgers, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Indiana, Penn State. So that's a lot of interesting games this week that can help shape the picture down the road. Maybe there's an upset here, but again, nothing that really jumps out to you. And before we move on, I do want to talk about these teams down here. Got a little bit ahead of myself. So watch out for Rutgers, because when you watch the way that Rutgers played that Michigan team, held the best rushing attack in the nation to only 112 yards. This Rutgers team is playing with some fire, playing with some passion. Really, really good team that Greg Schiano has put together. They can probably win a game that they're, quote, not supposed to, and so can Nebraska. Now, a lot of people, when they first saw Nebraska up on the board, might have said, why do you have Nebraska up on the board? They're not going to win the Big Ten. No, I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten, especially with Iowa in the Big Ten West and Wisconsin, Minnesota, all the teams like that. So, no, I definitely don't think they can win the Big Ten West, but they're probably, again, like Rutgers, probably not going to win their division, but they're going to make a run and win a game that they're, quote, not supposed to, right? Rutgers, Nebraska has been playing with a lot of fire, a lot of passion lately. They were very close against Oklahoma, very close against Michigan State, even outplayed Michigan State. Just stupid mental mistakes cost them that game. So if Nebraska can continue to play that way and continually play like that against teams that they shouldn't beat, say like a Michigan or an Iowa or even an Ohio State, right? Maybe even a Wisconsin. It's going to be interesting because Nebraska can help shape this picture too if they keep playing like they're playing right now. Now, back to the games, the impact games. I've already mentioned this week, Iowa at Maryland, Ohio State at Rutgers, Michigan at Wisconsin, Indiana at Penn State. So again, if there are some upsets, yes, it definitely shapes the picture, but nothing that really like jumps out to you. You're saying, Nate, give me something that jumps out to you. Well, how about the week after this week? Maryland at Ohio State. Okay, probably not a huge one there. Michigan State at Rutgers, again, probably not super big. Michigan at Nebraska, again, potential for an upset, but nothing really crazy. Here's the big one. Penn State at Iowa. Ooh, a potential rematch of the Big Ten championship game right there in what would that be? Week 6. I am on board. Let me onto that train. That is going to be a fun ride. That's going to be a fun game. Watch out for that one. The next couple of weeks, nothing special. The week of the 6th, or on the 16th, you have Michigan State at Indiana. And on the 23rd, you have Ohio State at Indiana. So chance for Indiana to make some noise there. And then on the final week of October, on the 30th, you have Iowa at Wisconsin. And then 2 really big games if all the teams that are on there make it through the rest of their games. And they can't. So that's Penn State at Ohio State, and Michigan at Michigan State. So those are 2 huge games as well, potentially top 10 matchups for each of them. If they can make it through the rest of their schedules unscathed, they don't play anyone else on the thing as of yet. So some really interesting games coming up in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is far from over as well. Again, these teams right now are the front runners, but I would still probably consider Ohio State as the front runner in the Big Ten. The gap is closing, right? These teams are going to make it interesting. Even Indiana, Wisconsin have the chance to make it interesting, but you can't count Ohio State out because they are Ohio State. They have the talent to do it. And if Ohio State wins the rest of their games, look, you're looking at a loss to Oregon, possible Pac-12 champions. You have wins that are going to be against Penn State, Michigan, Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska, and then potentially a Big Ten championship game against Iowa. That's a playoff resume if I've ever seen one. Again, anyone that comes out of the Big Ten will have a playoff resume. I just listed it for Ohio State. You could list it for any one of the teams on the board. Big Ten will be interesting to watch. All right, let me switch sides, and we'll talk about the Pac-12, SEC, and then the group of 5. So switching sides here, talking about the Pac-12. Surprise of the season so far for Pac-12 has been USC, right? Surprised some people, including myself, but not others. USC has been a team that's always said they are their own worst enemy, which is true. And that is shown this year. They finally got rid of Clay Helton, and there have been mixed results without him. So a good win against Washington State, the first game without him, and then a bad loss to Oregon State the next game without him. So they're sitting at 2-2, likely out of the playoff picture, but again, can still create chaos in the Pac-12. For Oregon, it's their conference to lose at this point. They are the Pac-12's best hope to get into the playoff. And even I think with one loss, Oregon still might not be out of it because they have that win over Ohio State, who absolutely can still win the Big Ten conference. You can go through scenarios and play things out in your head. It's not going to do you much good right now, though. But it is Oregon's conference to lose by a long shot. But again, some other teams that can make it interesting, Arizona State and UCLA. Both of them are 3-1. Caveat is they play each other this week. And UCLA also has to play Oregon later this month on the 23rd. So interesting there, right? Because if UCLA were to win this game here against Arizona State and then beat Oregon, that creates some interesting conversation, right? That creates some very interesting conversation, interesting debates. And if that happens, definitely I will be here to talk about it. Also, you got to watch out for Utah and Washington. I know they haven't performed the best up to this point, but with the talent they have on these teams, and if they pull together, they can be really good. And again, create some upsets. Oregon has to go on the road to play both of these. I believe UCLA has to go on the road to play both of these as well. And while Oregon avoids USC, UCLA has to go on the road and play USC later this year as well. So lots of games to still be decided. Also watch out for Oregon State. Oregon State's got a really good run game this year. Their defense has been playing solid as well. So for Oregon State, don't count them out. Them sitting at 3-1, I know they haven't played the best of competition, but they just absolutely demolished a USC team that has loads of talent. And if they can create some chaos in the Pac-12. So again, Pac-12, really, it's generally simple. It's Oregon's conference to lose. I feel like if Oregon loses a game, maybe they lose to UCLA, maybe to Washington, they're going to say, yep, that's it. The Pac-12 is done and out of the playoff. Not necessarily, because if Oregon has that win against Ohio State, and if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, Oregon wins the Pac-12, there's an easy case right there for both of them to get into the college football playoff. with both of them sitting at 12-1. So it'll be interesting to see what plays out from there. Let's move on to our final conference, which is the SEC. I know I didn't talk a lot about the Pac-12, but again, if you have questions about any conference that I've talked to up to this point, leave them in the comment section down below. And if you have questions about the SEC, but as of right now, there are probably a lot of questions about the SEC. So Bama, Georgia up here, number 1, number 2 teams in the nation. They look like locks. They look like absolute playoff locks. If both of them go 12-0 in the regular season, they meet in the SEC championship, there is a high, you know what? I'll guarantee you, if both of them go 12-0, get into the SEC championship game, and it's a close, respectable game, both of these teams are getting into the college football playoff, period, end of story. Because both of these teams have looked like the best 2 teams overall. You could make the case for either one of these to be number 1. That's not what I'm here to do right now. But both of them currently stand at 4-0 with some pretty good wins under their belt. Alabama, of course, has wins against Miami, who I know hasn't looked great right now, but can look or can have a respectable record at the end of the season. And, of course, over Florida. And Georgia has that win over Clemson, albeit Clemson's not looking that great right now either. And Georgia has a win over a good UAB team that they pretty much shut out. It was 56-7. So both these teams, probably playoff locks. But there are some other undefeated teams in the SEC. 2 of them are ranked, and that is Arkansas and Ole Miss. They sit at 8 and 12 respectively. Still really good teams, and they're going to have chances to prove themselves this week. I'll talk about impact games in October for the SEC, much like I did with the Big Ten. With the ACC, I didn't feel like I needed to do that because it's pretty slim. With the Big 12, again, everyone plays everyone. I did it with the Big 10. With the Pac-12, again, only certain teams. And then with the SEC, it's important because notice I have no teams to watch out for. And I'll tell you why in a second. But anyways, back to the undefeated teams, right? Arkansas sitting there. Ole Miss is sitting there. Both of these teams have been pleasant surprises in their own ways. Everyone knew Arkansas was going to be underrated. At least most people did. And they've proven that they are more than just underrated, that they are a legitimate threat in the SEC. And Ole Miss, same thing. That defense has gotten a hell of a lot better. And it's made Ole Miss, again, a true contender in the SEC. Probably, comparatively speaking, not to the likes of Bama and Georgia, but you never know. And then another undefeated team, Kentucky. Kentucky is another undefeated team in the SEC that can create chaos. They probably have to win out and go undefeated to make the college football playoff. But if Kentucky keeps playing like they're playing, they can pull off some upsets. So watch out for Kentucky. This is a really, really good football team that I think is being overshadowed by the rest of the SEC, right? Lots of 3-1 teams in the SEC as well that can still push their way into the playoff, that being Florida, Texas A&M, Auburn, and even LSU. I think LSU still has a shot to get in. They won a national title in 2019, so the name brand recognition is there. I think the talent is there for that LSU team as well. I know I wasn't high on this LSU team coming in, so I feel like their chances are pretty slim, much like Auburn's, maybe A&M's now, and Kentucky's. But again, they can still push their way into the championship game if they win enough, if they pull off a lot of upsets. But the SEC, and this has been the talk about the SEC for years, it is the best conference in college football, without a doubt, although the Big Ten, giving them a run for their money this year with the way the Big Ten has been looking. For the SEC, though, they have the possibility, and in my opinion, the likeliness to beat itself up, to give all of its teams at least one or more losses. So let's look at impact games for the SEC. This week, Florida at Kentucky. Kentucky can make some noise there, like I just said, and push Florida possibly out of the playoff conversation with 2 losses. Auburn and LSU, same thing there. That's a playoff elimination game. Loser of that, probably out of the playoffs. But then the 2 big ones in the SEC this week, Bama and Ole Miss, Georgia and Arkansas. Now, the number 1 and number 2 teams in the nation both have those games at home. But those are 2 really huge games relatively early in the season. So very excited to watch both of those this week. I will be previewing both of them tomorrow. Do not worry. I'll predict them. Again, I'm still making that little the graphics up for that, but that video will be out tomorrow, I promise. The week of October 9th, Georgia and Auburn, the deepest rival, the oldest rivalry in the Deep South, they call it. Also Arkansas and Ole Miss. So a chance then, if Arkansas and Ole Miss lose the games against Bama and Georgia, which seems likely up to this point, then they play each other the very next week after. So again, that's a playoff elimination game right there. If both teams enter that one with one loss, you also have LSU, Kentucky, and Alabama. And Alabama, Texas A&M that same week as well. The week after that, this will be on October 16th. You have Kentucky at Georgia, Auburn at Arkansas, and Florida at LSU. On the 23rd, you're going to have LSU at Ole Miss. And then on the 30th, you're going to have Ole Miss at Auburn and Georgia at Florida. So again, likeliness and the possibility for the SEC to beat itself up is there because the SEC is that good. There are a lot of good teams in the SEC. And this next month of October, these next 5 weeks are going to tell us a lot about what the SEC has to offer, right? All right, if you have any questions for me about the SEC, please leave them in the comment section down below. These teams down here are not out of it by any means. Kentucky, while they probably have to go undefeated to make the playoff, maybe one loss to, say, Georgia, Kentucky can create some chaos. And teams down here can create some chaos as well. Might be an upset from another team outside, like, say, a Tennessee, a South Carolina, a Mississippi State. Maybe you might see one of those. But overall, the SEC, it's got a lot of figuring out to do itself as well. Down here at the bottom now, I am going to switch sides again because, or here, let me just try this. Yeah. Yeah, let me move my mic a little bit. Yeah, here, okay. So let's do this, right? All right. So the group of 5 and independent teams down here. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. Hopefully it's not that quiet. I'll try to speak a little louder. But Cincinnati, Notre Dame, BYU, I think are the front runners for not only the New Year's 6 spot down here, but also for the college football playoff. Notre Dame, obviously, being an independent team and being Notre Dame, they've made the playoff before. They definitely can make it again. Lots of things that Notre Dame still has to get better, consistency-wise especially, but they can get into the playoff. So can Cincinnati. And that is a huge game this week for both of those teams because this week, Cincinnati plays Notre Dame. Yeah. And if you didn't know that, well, now you do. You're welcome. That is going to be a very interesting one. Very interesting. Possible playoff elimination game right there. And again, whichever team wins cements themselves as a great player in the college football playoff, especially if it's Cincinnati. What a story that would be if Cincinnati were to pull off that win against Notre Dame. Again, I will make a prediction on that game tomorrow. So wait for my thoughts there. But Desmond Ritter's played well this year. Jack Cohn has played well at times. Definitely can be a good quarterback for Notre Dame. And also BYU. BYU is a team that I think could be a sneaky chance to make the playoff. I don't think they're going to, but definitely a sneaky shot because BYU has looked really good. In my opinion, better than last year, and now they have the games to prove it. They still have to play Boise State, Baylor, and USC. So still lots of chances to prove their worth for BYU. Should be interesting to watch. And then a couple outside chances right here. While I don't think they're going to make the college football playoff, could definitely be a nice run for either of these teams over here to make the New Year's Six Bowl, that being Coastal Carolina. Don't really have that much left on their schedule to prove. Maybe the game against App State, Sun Belt title win against Louisiana. And then for Fresno State, they're in the Mountain West. A lot of good teams in the Mountain West. Wyoming, Nevada, San Diego State, Boise State, all teams left on Fresno State's schedule. Yes, they have a loss, but if Cincinnati were to make the playoff, Notre Dame probably gets into a group of 5 spot, and then or probably gets into a New Year's 6 spot, and then maybe Fresno State takes that group of 5 spot. Who knows? But yeah, guys, there's still a lot of figuring out to do here. As usual with my reviews, I'm going to duck down. So, sorry, don't know what happened with my green screen. As usual with my reviews, I'm going to duck down so you guys can look at the board. If you have any questions about anything on the board, something you didn't hear from me that you want to hear my opinion about, please leave it in the comment section. I will try to answer it as best I can. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And as always, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys tomorrow with my preview prediction. Goodbye.